Hello students, welcome back. This is Dr. Mercado speaking. I hope all of you are having a fabulous week. This particular lecture is going to cover chapter 2, which deals with computing wages and salaries. Now, just a friendly reminder to please ensure that you read the chapter before you attempt any of your assignments. You review the PowerPoint provided in Blackboard. You review in detail the examples provided within your book. It has great examples step by step. You listen to the lectures that I'm uploading, which is what you're listening to currently. And then you review the Show Me How videos embedded within your homework problems. Now, let me see. Okay, this is one of your homework problems or your homework assignments in Cengage, okay? Now, those Show Me How videos are made available in some problems, not all of them, okay? Like, for example, this first problem that I'm looking at does not have a video. But if you look at the second problem, it has a Show Me How video here. So if you click on the link, it'll open up a new window, and then it has a video. Gross earnings will be calculated for so there's a video included that will help you solve the problem, okay? So make sure that you review the resources provided. If you need to refresh your memory on what was covered or what this particular problem covers, you can always go to the ebook and it takes you specifically to the objective that covers this particular problem, okay? So that way you can go back and reread that specific section. In your homework, you are provided some examples that way you can use for guidance as you're solving, okay? So make sure that you review those Show Me How videos if available in Cengage. Once you are done, make sure that you complete your quiz and your homework. Your assignments are due on Sunday at 11 p.m. Okay? If you have any questions, you can contact me Monday through Friday. If you need to see me in person, I'm available during my scheduled office hours at the Pecan campus, so you're more than welcome to stop by. Make sure that you refer to your syllabus so you can ensure what time availability I have for my office hours, as I'm only in my office during the scheduled office hours. Okay, if you, as you're working your homework problems, you have any questions or concerns, you can always send me an email or a Blackboard message and I will respond as soon as possible. Make sure that you include the problem number that you're working on and your attempted solution so I can review your work and provide guidance. Okay. Please, this is super important, keep your syllabus handy at all times and scratch off or mark off the assignments as you complete them so you can make sure that you've completed all of your weekly assignments. I do not grant extensions or makeups, okay, for missed assignments. If you missed it, you missed it. You need to organize and manage your time to ensure that you meet the class deadlines, okay? So, now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump over to the first problem that I'm going to be covering, which is problem 2.4a. Okay. Now in this problem, it tells us that the wages and hours information for 5 employees of McNeese Enterprises for the week ended July 7 is given below. Employees work a standard 40-hour work week and are paid time and 1/2 for all hours worked over 40 for that work week. For each employee, we have to compute the regular earnings, the overtime rate, the overtime earnings, and the total gross earnings. We have to compute the total gross earnings for all employees. Okay. Now, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started with Carmen. Carmen worked 47 hours and gets paid $12.45 an hour. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to calculate the regular earnings. The regular earnings are the first 40 hours because this is a standard 40-hour work week. So it'll be 40 hours. And we're going to multiply that by the regular hourly rate, which is $12.45, okay? So 40 hours, which is the standard work week, times the regular hourly wage rate of $12.45 will give us $498, okay? So 40 hours times $12.45 gives me $498. Now the overtime rate says it's paid at time and a half for all hours over 40. So to calculate the overtime rate, we need to get the hourly rate, which is $12.45, and we're going to multiply by 1.5. That is 1.5 the rate, okay? Okay, and that gives me 1868. Now be very careful when you're using Excel. The system automatically rounds for you. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the round feature. That way I know that I'm rounding correctly. Let me see, round. I'm going to use that one. And so you basically select round. In this case, if you want to do it for all of the cells, I know for a fact that this number is to the third decimal place. So I want to make sure, for example, this calculation is 18.675. The system automatically rounded to 1868. Okay, I want to make sure that I round to 2 decimal places. So I'm going to have 2 decimal places, and that's going to be 1868. That way, when I run any future calculations using this cell, it's going to be based on the rounded amount of 1868 instead of the unrounded amount. Like, let me show you in the calculator. Okay, so if you get 1245 times 1.5, it's 18.675. Okay, if I do not use the round function, which is what I'm using right here, if I do not use this function, all of my calculations are going to be using the 18.675. And I'm going to have some rounding errors in my calculations. So what I do here is I tell the system, round this number to 1868. That way, if I use this number in the future, it'll be the correct amount. Okay, so that way you see, usually the instructions in your homework problem tells you how to round. Most of your calculations are rounded to 2 decimal places. So because that third digit is a 5, we're going to round up to 18.68. Okay. Now, make sure that you use that round feature, especially when you're calculating rates. Okay. Or just double check. You know, for example, I knew that the system was doing something automatically in the bank end, so I knew that this number needed to be rounded, so I just double check my figure with my calculator. 1245 times 1.5, and then I knew that that number needed to be rounded. That is why I inserted the round function. And you basically just do equal sign round and then do the formula, and then you select the little insert function, and then you tell the system, okay, I want this number rounded to how many decimal places, and I want 2 decimal places. Just select that 2, and then you do OK. Okay. So now, once we have the overtime rate, we can calculate our overtime earnings. So because I am using Excel, I'm going to select my overtime rate of 18.68, and I'm going to multiply it by the number of hours worked overtime. And that is 7. So 40 hours is the regular hourly week, 7 hours of overtime. So that's going to give me 130.76. Okay. Now I can get my total gross earnings. Your total gross earnings is your regular earnings plus your overtime earnings. Okay, so you add your regular plus your overtime, and that's going to give me 628.76. Okay. We're going to do the same logistics for the rest of the employees. Now we have Galasso. Okay. Galasso only worked 42 hours. So we know that 40 hours are paid at the regular rate of $11.90. So we're going to get 40 hours times $11.90. That's going to be $4.76. Now we're going to get the overtime rate. Okay. So the overtime rate, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do equals. I'm going to do round. I'm going to do open parentheses. So I'm going to get my regular rate times 1.5. Okay. Close parentheses. I'm going to go to my insert function, and I'm going to tell it to round it to 2 decimal places. And that's going to be 1785. Okay. So my overtime rate is 1785. My overtime earnings is going to be your overtime rate times the number of hours overtime. In this particular case for Galasso, we have 2 hours of overtime. So that will be 3570. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to insert, that way we see 2 digits. Okay. Now your total gross earnings will be your regular earnings plus your overtime earnings. Okay. Okay. Now if we're using Excel, you can copy the formulas. Okay. So for example, if you let's say for example we want to copy this particular, if any formula is included in this particular row. Okay, we've done all of the calculations, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to insert formulas. Now, for the regular earnings, it's basically we enter the amount of hours. We have to look at the number of hours. So you can't just copy and paste and forget about it. No. In this case, all of our employees work 40 hours, so I can go ahead and copy that formula. Okay. The overtime rate can be copied. the overtime earnings, that needs to be adjusted manually because the number of overtime hours changes. Okay, now this is what I would do. I would select the whole cell for my formulas, and then the little box right here in the bottom, I'm going to drag it down. Okay, and you see it autofills for me. Okay, now this is not correct. I need to go back and make some corrections. Okay, I need to go back and review my formulas. Okay, so what did the 434 do? Well, it's 40 hours times 1085. That is correct. I'm going to leave that as is. That's 434. Okay, the overtime rate. I did the round function, and it's the 1085 times the 1.5 rounded to 2 decimal places. That is correct. I don't have to worry about that. Now here is where we have to make an adjustment. The overtime earnings. Okay, what I'm doing is I'm getting my overtime rate and multiplying, in this case, by 2. Okay, I don't wanna multiply by 2 because Jones had 8 hours of overtime. Okay, so I need to update that to 8. Okay, and that will give me 130.24. Okay, so make sure that you go back and you update the number of overtime hours because each employee has different overtime hours. Okay, and then that will stay the same, which is your 434 plus your 130.24 will give you the 564.24. I'm going to review Rotna. Rotna has 40 hours times 1125. That is correct. The overtime rate is 1125 times 1.5. That gives me 1688. That is correct. Now for my overtime earnings, Rotna has 4 hours of overtime. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get my 1688 times 4. Okay, I'm updating my overtime hours. Okay, by 4. And that's going to give me 6752. And then I'm going to get my total gross earnings, which is your regular earnings plus your overtime earnings. And then that will give me 517.52. And then last but not least, we have Lee. Lee worked 45 and a half hours at 1340. So what are we going to do for regular? We're going to do the regular rate of 1340 times 40 hours. That's 536. We're going to go ahead and we're going to use the same function, which is your regular rate times 1.5 rounded to 2 decimal places. That is 2010. The overtime rate, we have the overtime rate of 2010, and we're going to multiply by 5.5 hours. Okay, he had 5.5 hours of overtime. That's 110.55. And then my gross earnings will be the 536 plus the 110.55. That'll be 646.55. Once you are done, we can just add. And to add, we do equals sum, open parentheses, and we're going to add all of those totals. Okay? And that will give me 2,868.77. Okay? So this is how you calculate. Okay? Now, what I would have done, and this is just something on the side, what I would have done to make my calculations easier, okay, and this is just me going the extra mile, is I would have broken down my, let me show you what I would have done, okay. I would break down my hours worked into regular hours, and then overtime hours, okay. So I know I have 47 hours. 40 is regular, 7 is overtime. Okay, 40 is regular, 2 is overtime. 40 is regular, 8 is overtime. 40 is regular, and then 4 is overtime, and then 40 is regular, and then 5.5 is overtime. Okay, so what have I done here? I have split my hours into regular hours and overtime hours. That way I know which are my regular hours and which are not. And then I'm just going to delete this real quickly, and I'm going to show you my calculations just using Excel. Very simple. So now that I've split my regular hours, okay, and this is just, it just takes a little bit of practice getting familiar with using Excel. But if you use Excel, it's just going to make your life so much easier, and your calculations are going to be a breeze. So now let's do it this way, where we break down our hours between regular and overtime. So my regular, oh, and I deleted too much information. Okay, that one was provided. I'm just not going to delete that. Okay, so here we have our regular hourly rate. Okay, so my regular earnings is going to be my regular wage rate, which is $12.45, and then I'm going to multiply it by my regular hours. Okay, then my overtime rate is going to be, I'm going to do the round feature, the round function. I'm going to get my rate of $12.45 times 1.5%. Okay, and then I'm going to select to round to 2 digits. Okay, so that's my rounded overtime rate. My overtime earnings will be my overtime rate times my overtime hours. And then my total gross earnings is going to be my regular earnings plus my overtime earnings. Okay, so I've done formulas for all of these based on my regular hours and my overtime hours columns. I've split them in two, that way my formulas have the correct information. Once I do that, I can just select all of the cells, get this little corner that has a little block, the little box right there, the green box. You're going to scroll it down, and then it's pre-filled. You do not have to make any changes. Why? Because we've broken down the hours and our actual calculations reflect these hours. Okay? Before, we had to go back and update it based on the hours worked because we needed to manually adjust for the regular hours and the overtime hours. What I did here is I broke down those hours between my regular and my overtime. And my calculations or my formulas, sorry about that, are actually embedded within the formulas. So for example, for the rate, well, that's provided. For the regular earnings, what the system will automatically do is go to your regular hours, multiplied by the regular hourly wage rate. Okay. For the overtime rate, the system will automatically get your regular hourly wage rate and multiply it by 1.5, rounded to 2 decimals. For the overtime earnings, the system will automatically get the number of overtime hours that we indicated times the overtime rate that we calculated. And then for the total gross earnings, it will be the regular earnings plus the overtime earnings. Okay, and it gives us the same solution. All I did was break out the hours between the regular and the overtime. And I think this is just easier or simpler. That way students can see, okay, which one are my regular hours and which ones are my overtime hours. And by doing this, all you have to do is enter formulas in the first cell. Once your formulas are good on the first cell, you just copy them over to the rest of the cells and it will automatically calculate it for you. Okay. If you prefer, you can do all of these calculations in a calculator, and then it just takes you a bit longer. If you set it up in Excel, it becomes a breeze, and you can just copy and paste the different formulas and solve the problem very quickly. Okay, so requirement A, we have to compute the different requirements, which we did. For part B, we have to compute the gross earnings, which is the total for all of our employees, and it came out to $28,6877. Okay. Make sure that if you are using Excel, you use the round function. Okay. That way you round your numbers. If you do not round your numbers, this will be off. Okay. Your overtime earnings will be off, and then your total gross earnings will be off, and your whole problem will be incorrect. So be very careful to make sure that you, whenever you're calculating specifically rates, that you use the round feature or function. Okay. So that is basically it for the first problem that I'm going to be going over. I hope it helped you out and provide you some pointers as to how to solve the problem, the calculations needed, as well as using Excel. Okay. Make sure that you listen to the other lectures that I'm recording for you. And until next time, have a wonderful day.